Welcome to the Waterloo City Council work session. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Mr. Bozen?
Here.
Mr. Amos?
Here.
Mr. Morrissey?
Here.
Mrs. Klein? Mr. Foyce?
Here.
Mr. Greider?
Here.
Mrs. Jewin?
Here. Okay, need a motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
And we had a second?
Yes.
Terrific. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Let me kick this out. The work session is about a discussion of recommendations made by the Finance Committee to expense pre-authorization travel records and garbage refunds. Kind of in two parts for the work session. The first shorter part will just be addressing what the Finance Committee voted on and is going to recommend to you for your consideration. The second part, which will be more lengthy, addresses our travel policy. And what I've done over the last couple of weeks is I've heard from some of you, and I've tried to put those comments that you into an organized fashion, if you will. I've talked to Michelle Wiedner on all of the issues. So what I'm going to recommend, I hope you all got the email that Kelly just sent out to all of you from me. I'd like to go through those recommendations, have just an explanation of those comments, and then we can open each one up for discussion. Is that acceptable to everyone? So we try to keep on track? Okay, good, thank you. Sure. Then the first thing I'll address, I'm sorry, what? Did somebody make a comment?
Yeah,
No.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Morrissey.
What email from you?
It was just sent out about an hour ago, and it came to you from Kelly.
What's it about?
About the travel policy and the comments that I received over the last couple weeks. Can you access that, Mr. Morrissey?
Let me try.
Okay. Well, if not, I will read through it, but I thought it might be helpful if you had a copy to kind of follow along. The first item is the Finance Committee recommendation as to kind of the structure of the Finance Committee meetings. And as you see in front of you, the recommendation was to increase pre-authorizations from 1,000 to 2,500. Number two is to review the travel request over 100. So that stays the same. That's the way it is right now. And finally, that refunds and bill payments remain the same. So the only change we're recommending is the increased pre-authorization from 1,000 to 2,500. We don't need to vote on that now. That will go to the full council at a regular meeting, and the rest of the discussion might result in some changes to that. So, any questions on the Finance Committee recommendation? Okay, thank you. All right, under the travel policy, the items for consideration, the first one is to create electronic travel request form. And the good news to that is because of our action last week on the electronic signature, that does allow us to have electronic travel request form. And Chelsea is working on that right now. And Kelly, I know you'll be listening to our conversation, so you'll know that there's some things we'd like to add to that form, okay? Kelly?
Yeah, I guess
Okay.
I'm a little confused on talking about the electronic signature software.
Well, I thought I was told that by virtue of getting electronic signature, that whole software package allowed us to go to an electronic travel request form. Is that incorrect?
I would say yes.
Okay.
There's other
Well,
there's other
regardless,
platforms. There's other platforms that we would be able to utilize for electronic signature and for electronic forms. But I guess I'll just listen to what the committee has to say
Okay.
to understand
The
better
main
what you're
thing-
coming from.
The main thing is that you are working on electronic travel request form, right?
The travel request forms are currently in PDF. What I'm working on with Novus is the ability to submit the travel request form directly to the agenda and then have that route to finance for approval.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So, Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Bogan.
what I was originally asking this work session, what I was looking for was the ability for the department heads to submit electronically as opposed to having to do the carbon copy and hard copy. Is that possible, Kelly?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm working on.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, number two was,
carbon per year.
Well, whatever. Yeah.
okay. All right, we're through number one. We understand where we are at number one. Okay. Number two was to permit to use reasonably priced transportation and lodging. The recommendation that came from a council member was to change the word permit to require, so that we would require that anyone traveling would use reasonably priced transportation and lodging. Okay? Questions on that one? Pardon?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Graham.
Is there a policy that explains what reasonably priced is? Just because that seems like a subjective term.
Pretty nebulous, yeah.
You know, I might have very, Spartan conditions and understanding of what reasonable means, but someone else might not. So I'm just wondering if we have a definition of that, or if we need to sort of flesh it out more.
Okay. Mrs. Weidner, do you want to address that?
Yes, on pages 1 and 2 of the actual policy, we really tried to go into some detail explaining what you should do. For example, for example, and this is a quote from it, a bus or a train may cost less than a plane, but the added time away can make these slower options more expensive to the city overall. So it's trying to provide guidelines without making it so restrictive that if we put a dollar limit on it, the same dollar limit doesn't buy the same amount of hotel in different cities. So, and sometimes depending on how quickly room blocks go, you may have to pay more to attend a conference that you need to attend. So we tried to word this so that, and it does rely on the employee to be responsible, as it says, in exercising good judgment in requesting and arranging and making a trip, so that we are using our taxpayers' money wisely. And I guess
It is a little nebulous, Mr. Raymond, but I think we are counting on the good judgment of the department head, the employee, and certainly the finance.
Yeah, and knowing that it's there and written somewhere, and with some examples, that certainly helps. So.
Did everyone get a copy? We sent out a copy of the travel policy a couple weeks ago. Did everyone get that and have a chance to read through it? Okay, I'm seeing some nodding of heads, so hopefully you did. Okay, number 3. Request for rental car is typically denied. What we're recommending is that on this new form, we add a space that would ask the employee to explain why they needed a rental car. In most cases, there is a city car available. Some employees like driving their own car. But if they specifically want a rental car, we're suggesting that we add that to the form so that they can explain. And
But the comment I would like to make a comment on that because I'm not aware that a request has ever actually been denied. I know that I do, if people make a request to use a rental car, I do ask them to explain why. Because even when I go to conferences out of town that I fly to, I typically would take a shuttle to my conference hotel, and I don't need to drive and don't drive the whole time. And so that initial reasoning behind putting that in here was to save taxpayer dollars. We don't have to do that if council wants to allow that, but, you know, it typically is going to be a couple $100 extra to allow employees to have rental cars when they travel to conferences. And sometimes they need it, and so if we have that conversation and it's needed, that's fine. And I just don't recall a time that anybody's ever changed their travel, and maybe I just don't remember, but I don't recall that.
But again, putting it on the form lets the employee and the department head know that that is going to be addressed. And there might be a good reason they need a rental. We just want them to address it up front. Yep. Okay? Okay. Then going to number 4, air travel at lowest available fare. And the comment recommendation there is that we need to enforce that, and that on the form we want the employee to state what the class is for their airline ticket. Is it coach? Is it business? Is it first class? So that we know that up front. Now, if they have sometimes from a travel agent, they might have an itinerary, and that might state it on there as well, which is good. We just want to make sure they're going with the lowest available fare. But tied right into that is we would like every employee to make every effort to fly out of Waterloo. And we want to add that again onto the form. If you're not flying out of Waterloo, why? Is it because you've done the math on it and it's more expensive? The timing doesn't work into your schedule, whatever the case might be. But we want to encourage everyone to fly from Waterloo, and if they don't, to explain why.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Bogan.
And to add to that, if a person is traveling and they choose to upgrade, that should come out of their own pocket.
Yes.
And so that on a travel request that we will pay for the lowest airfare to get you there in a timely manner and back. But if you particularly choose to upgrade a business or another class, then you should as the employee should be responsible for the upgrade.
Understood and agreed. Does that make sense to everybody, both of those items? Great. We're making great progress here. Number 5, make every effort to use a city vehicle. And we know that city vehicle is not always available. And Michelle, I want to turn this one over to you for a little more discussion.
Okay, I did speak to Randy Bennett earlier today, and neither one of us can really remember many times where the city vehicle really has not been available. So most cases, when most employees are traveling, they are using city vehicles. There is one group of department employees doing one type of activity, and that happens to be firefighters that are doing training for the hazmat center. Their arrangement for many years has been that they drive their own vehicles from home. So I do know we have that exception. That's the only one that comes to mind. But generally, people are available.
Did somebody make a comment?
I did, Sharon.
Yeah.
And the reason I brought this up is it's happened in the past, and I've participated in that because there are times that Randy only has cargo vans, multiple passenger vans available when a number of people are going, and if they're booked in advance, that's where you come into that equation that you need to have alternate transportation.
And I guess the only thing I can add to that is and I was kind of visiting with Sandy because I know my finger hasn't been as long, but, kind of going back for what Sandy's recollection was, usually if that was to take place, it might be once, if not twice a year. It doesn't happen very often, but there has been a couple of times a year where, the vehicles have been spoken for and we didn't have them, but otherwise, for the most part, we do.
Okay, the main point there is to try to get the employees to use that city vehicle. Make every effort to use it if available. Okay?
Correct.
Okay, the next one is stay at the most reasonably priced accommodation, and the recommendation there is that we enforce that policy. I'll turn it over to Michelle, but the comment being that that's a hard one to enforce. We don't expect Michelle to go out there and check all hotels in the area. Sometimes it's just because you know that another group went to the same location a month before and got a hotel at a much cheaper rate. That could be because there was a block on the rooms by that organization. There could be a variety of reasons. But the main thing there is that as much as we can, we want to enforce that you're staying at a reasonably priced accommodation. Michelle, do you want to expand on that at all?
I think I would just ask if someone has ideas about how we would do that. I think it would be very difficult for the finance department to do much with that. But I'm open to ideas if you got ways to do it. Because the departments make those reservations directly. We only see the bill that's turned in. We don't necessarily know, which places they checked and why they selected the hotel they selected.
Michelle, if the department makes the reservation, then wouldn't the department be responsible for getting the most reasonable rate?
Yes, they definitely are. I just don't know how, when we use the word enforce that, I guess I'm assuming, which is always a bad term, that you're wanting some kind of documentation or you're wanting finance to somehow prove that they've done that, and I just need some help about what that would look like. And maybe that's not what you meant. Maybe that's just, asking departments.
Well, no, I do think that's what we meant. In the example that was given to me is that we know somebody went to a hotel in a certain city and paid X amount of dollars, when conversely we know that other people went to the same city just a month before or a month after or whatever and paid a much cheaper rate. So that's what kind of brought that issue to the forefront. And maybe it's just got to be up to the department head to do that. I don't know. Does anybody have any suggestions on how we would enforce that?
Madam Chair, I brought this up because I truly believe it is up to the department heads to do that. And sometimes, depending on where their conference is at, the training that they're going to, it might be a little more expensive to stay at that hotel, but we're not paying transportation costs to get from hotel to hotel. So that's all factored into it. All I'm trying to do with actually putting that in the verbiage is to not put the department heads on notice, but put it in the back of their minds to make every effort possible to get the most reasonably priced accommodation that fit that training need.
Well, and sometimes just letting the department heads know that that's of interest to us, that it's important to us, brings it more to their attention. Any other comments on that? Okay. This one, the next one, number 7, is the pre- and post-conference lodging. Right now, if anything, we will pay lodging if it's more than 125 miles away. And the discussion was to change that to 90 miles. And I think the issue, and I'll let David expand on this, is 125 was probably designed so that it would exclude Des Moines. Because we have probably a lot of trips to Des Moines. Although, Michelle, you were going to check, and I don't know if you've had an opportunity yet to see how many trips to Des Moines we're talking about.
Yeah, I only looked at fiscal 19, and I came up with about 150. So, if all those 150 went the night before, you're probably talking about increasing the cost of that travel, because you'd have to pay a hotel and a dinner and a breakfast, probably looking at $18,000 to $20,000 increase in a year.
Just by expanding the mileage, or shrinking the mileage, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah, because the 90 miles, that excludes Ames, then would be covered for pre-night stay, Altoona, Butte. It picks up a lot of places that we go often. That's the reason it was put in there back at the time we did it. The intent was not to cover the night before when you go to Des Moines. In most cases, unless it started very early or something like that. That was, I can tell you at the time it was done, it was about saving money, but that is, council's play.
Sure. David, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, and if we wanted to increase it to 100 miles to take out some of those cities that Michelle was talking about, that's an option. It's open for discussion. But my problem with the 125 miles, and excluding Des Moines, is the fact that you have a 2-hour drive ahead of you. You've got to get down to City Hall or the central garage to pick up your car. You got to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. You got to be down there at 5 o'clock in the morning. You got to get on the road, get to downtown Des Moines or wherever you're at. So you're starting at 4 o'clock in the morning, find a place to park, walk to your hotel, walk to your conference, and then be there all day and be fresh and attentive. And then it also states that in that policy, if it's under that 125 miles, you could be required to come back that same night. Providing it didn't go till 10 o'clock at night or start before 7 o'clock in the morning. And my goal in this is just to make it easier for the employees. And if it's going to raise our travel and training $20,000, each department put in their travel and training budget, and if they choose to spend it that way, I feel that that's an appropriate way to spend it. And I know Michelle has talked about the issue with transferring funds to generate more funds into their travel and training budget, and if the department head is doing that should come before as an amendment. And then we would deal with that specifically. So my goal was to just basically to include Des Moines in that travel mileage, so that if a department head chose to send a teacher down the night before or a person down the night before, they have the ability to get down there the night before and start the day and the conference fresh.
You said a couple things that, Michelle, I want you to address. We talked about the ability of a department head to amend their budget. And with the belief that if they do amend their budget, it should come to us. Does that happen right now if somebody transfers dollars into their training line item? Do they come to us for an amendment?
No, they do not. If a department is transferring out of one expense line into another line, those do not come before finance accounts. Those are handled internally by my department. So, we have hundreds of budget amendments, not all about travel, but we process a lot of budget amendments in a year that never read to. The policy today says if they are going to increase revenue by $1,000 or more in order to increase their total expenses in their budgeted activity, then that comes to the finance committee. But if they're just moving around their line items, we don't ask it. That's my concern when everybody says, well, it's budgeted. You really don't see that when if people choose to amend things. So that's why I just wanted to be clear that you don't necessarily see it. And the other thing
Michelle, hold on. Do you think we should see it if they're amending their line items?
No, I don't think you need to take up your time. I just don't want you to make a decision saying it's okay to change this policy because if they're going to do an amendment, you're going to see it anyway, because I think the reality is you will not see it. Like, it's okay to make that decision, just don't make it assuming you're going to see the amendment, because I don't believe so. So that's one point. The other thing then that I think we need to address is what time conference starts that you're going to allow people to go down the night.
And right now, I believe in your summary, it's not in the policy, but in your summary, you say if it ends after 10 or later, or starts at 7 or before, correct?
Yeah, that was more of an example than a set in stone thing. It's just in parentheses as an example. But I do think, especially if you're going to allow that, you probably need to set a specific time. There's a lot of times, and I'm an example. A lot of the conferences that I attend in Des Moines do start at 8, and we have a lot of city employees that start work here at 7, so they kind of have an hour advantage. I don't always get here till 7:30 or 8. So it is kind of a pain, I guess I'll put it that way, for me personally to have to get up and drive the 2.5 hours and go to class for 8 hours and drive home. But I do it, and I do have a choice that if I wanted to, if that bothered me that much, I could pay for my own hotel or stay with someone maybe that I know in Des Moines. We do have some employees that do. So we need to talk about if there are things in Des Moines that tend to start not until 9 or 10. So that would be my question. Let's say a class starts at 9. For a lot of employees who already start work at 7, you're really not probably having to get up much earlier to get to Des Moines by 9 than you normally would to get to Waterloo by 7. So I think it would be a good idea and very helpful for you to think about what time you want to put on that. And I don't know of anybody that allows people to stay the night after classes, but again, that's up to you. That would be,
Do you want to address that in light of what Michelle said?
I never said anything about staying after class. If the conference is over, you come home. I was just trying to get people down there the night before if possible, and if their budget allowed it, so that they could start fresh that next day and be at that conference. Majority of the conferences that I attended a lot of them. If they started at 9 o'clock, your registration started at 8. So you can say the conference starts at 9, but when you need to be there at 8 o'clock and to go through all of your registration, it really technically starts at 8, in my opinion. But and I wouldn't have a problem saying, well, if it doesn't start till noon, you shouldn't have to go down the night before. It doesn't start till 10, but I truly believe that if you have to be down there at 8 o'clock in the morning, that you should have that option. If the department's budget allowed it to get down there the night before. And like I said, if we start seeing a huge expense and department heads are transferring money and make this happen, then we need to look at it. But and I think Mr. Foyt has something to say. I don't just mean to come up in front of you, right?
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Ray.
As far as, and again, this is something I'm not as versed in as Councilman Boson, with getting, like cars and all of those things. Are those things that can be they could be, picked up the night before and taken driven home, or is there a liability issue with it? I mean, I agree. It's very tough. I travel to Des Moines often, and it makes it difficult, to be as alert and everything, because you're stressing about traveling, getting there, getting up on time, and doing that. So while I don't disagree with that, is that an option as well, where staff could get cars and things the night before, so they didn't have to go out to the motor pool and then come back in?
We generally don't. We do ask that vehicles not go home. I mean, we all know how people chat when somebody's got a city vehicle and they don't perceive that they're on city business. So personally, I do tend to get it and at least leave it at City Hall, because that saves some time early in the morning. I think it just depends where the employee is located.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, and you also, when you get it, most people try to get their vehicle the night before if possible. you know, you also gotta, sometimes you end up taking them to the fuel pump because you gotta fuel up before you go. And there's more to it than just picking up a car and leaving. So, and that was my whole purpose to ratchet back that 125 mile radius. And if the council decides that they're comfortable with 125 miles, so be it. But, you know, I've experienced it firsthand many times, and I think that it's unfair to our employees.
Mr. Griner, did you want to address?
Yeah, before I lived here in Waterloo, I taught here in Waterloo, and I lived in Dubuque, and so I'm very familiar with Highway 20 and that stretch because I go there every day. And I will tell you, like, that's about 90-ish miles. And I understood that, like, my circumstance of doing it every day is different, but when you have to get up, get ready, get your things, get somewhere, it can be tough, and that's just not combating weather or things like that. So I'm flexible on moving it downward, because, you know, if we are paying for people to go to these conferences, we definitely want them to take the most out of it that they can, while also being cognizant that, like, where they're going might determine when they leave.
Other comments? So what's the sense here? How many people would like to change the mileage downward?
I get both of the one off downward.
Dave and Jerome, you wanted to go downward?
Yes, I don't have a problem with it going downward, sure.
Okay. Jonathan?
Yeah.
Okay. Ray?
Yep.
Downward?
Yep.
Pat?
It makes no difference to me.
Okay. Is 100 miles a good compromise?
If the 100 miles includes take Des Moines out of the loop, yes, because that would make you drive down an hour and a half to Ames, would make you drive the hour and a half to Dubuque. So I mean, it's totally different getting somewhere in Dubuque than it is getting somewhere in Des Moines too.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
I just want my whole goal was to ratchet that number back was to get Des Moines out of that exclusion.
Okay. If we went 100 miles, then Des Moines would be within that radius, or yes. So you could stay overnight in Des Moines, but it would preclude. So is 100 miles a good solution for everyone? Okay. Okay, we're going to recommend, at least at this point, nothing's final yet, we're going to recommend 100. What about the start time? Right now, is 9 o'clock a good start time on which you can go the night before? There aren't that many meetings that start at 8 o'clock, are there?
Like I said, Madam, most of your conferences, you registration. And
Yeah, if you get the registration in there. Michelle, what are you feeling comfortable with after this discussion?
I think that's up to you. I know. Obviously, I don't worry about getting there. You know, if registration starts at 8 and the class starts at 9, I tend to roll in at about 8:45. But that's some people are not comfortable with that, so that's a personal thing. Yeah. So
I'm going to recommend 9 o'clock, and going until 10 o'clock I think is pretty excessive. I think going until 7 o'clock in the evening. So 9 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the evening. What do people think of that recommendation?
I think if the conference starts at 10, registration at 9 would be an option, but I think 10 o'clock would be more reasonable than a 9 o'clock conference with a registration at 8. That's just me.
Well, let's throw out the 9 o'clock first and see how many support that. Jonathan?
I think, you know, I'm fine with 9. I mean, if we want to split, you know, if we want to keep following it and split the baby at 9:30, not that I think anything has, you know, goes with a half-hour increment. I'm fine with 9. But yeah, I would definitely say 7 because I think of those nights where I taught and then you had conferences and then trying to drive home in the dark. It can get hard after you spend a whole day kind of using your brain in one way to, you know. So I think 7's very good. I'm comfortable with 9.
Okay. Ray, how about you?
Yep, I think 9 to 7 is fine. You know,
Okay.
I don't imagine there are too many meetings that go past that, but there may be.
Okay. Jerome, how about you?
For what it's worth, for me, I can remember attending a few conferences, and actually the 10 o'clock doesn't sound too bad to me, Sharon. But like I say, I don't have a problem with 9 or 10, but I think 10 o'clock gives a little bit more leeway to the individual, but sometimes you may need that leeway.
Okay. Pat, what about you?
I'm just wondering, and this whole issue been brought to the union workers' attention?
I doubt it. We haven't
been applied to this. Have
Pardon?
the union's been allowed to have put in on this?
Michelle?
No, because that's a management decision, but that's up to you if you hear it.
Why don't we can pass that along to Lance if he thinks it needs union input? But I agree with Michelle. Policy such as this is not a negotiable. We think that this is a management issue.
Well, no.
Defer that to Lance for his input. Pardon?
Sure, but I would like to I would like to have this presented to the unions to have the workers input in on these policies because they affect them directly. Whether it's negotiable or a condition of employment or that, it is a condition of employment. Plus it also, even though it may not be something that's a permissive subject, let alone not a mandatory subject, it still is has a direct effect upon any employee who is required to go to any kind of conference. So, if the department heads are involved in this, I believe that the union should be contacted to see if any of their members have any input on this.
Okay. We can certainly do that. On this number 7, I'm going to just recommend that we're talking about changing it to 100 miles, and we're changing the conference that it goes until 7 in the evening and starts before 9 o'clock.
Madam Chair.
Number 8.
Madam Chair.
sorry.
I'd like, Sharon, I'd like to clarify one thing about item number 7. So the thing about it going till 7, I would think that's only an actual conference meeting time, and that is not eating time after your class. That comes up too sometimes. I mean, I've had people stop in Independence and think they were going to eat dinner on their way home and we were going to pay for that. So
what if the meal is part of the conference?
right, that's different. That's a meeting to me.
Okay, good.
I'm talking about just you going to a restaurant, or if, I don't even care if it's a drive-thru on the way home. I mean, we all, as an employee, we all eat and pay for it when we're at home. Oh, yeah. You know, I just think we need to clarify whether you're going to cover that or not.
Okay, would everyone agree that we would cover it if obviously it's part of the seminar or the conference, but not if it is something that they obtain on their own? Correct? Okay, I think we all agree with that, Michelle. Okay.
Madam Chair.
Number 8.
Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, yeah. Margaret, are you here?
Yeah, I've been here for quite a while.
I'm sorry, I
That's
can't
all right.
see you.
That's all right. I am like the others. I'm good with 9 a.m. and I'm good with 100 miles.
Okay, good. Thank you. Number 8. is out-of-county travel. There's a little, it's a conflict. Policy says that it's not required to submit a travel request if there are no expenses. The summary states that all out-of-county does require an expense or a travel report.
I think what the summary was, says is for training things. So that was because we had a finance committee that was wanting us to document all training types of things, not necessarily just the travel. So I just wanted to clarify that. And if there are expenses involved, then I think that kind of changes things.
Sure. If there's expenses involved, then it would require, obviously. The question is, if it's out of county and there are no expenses, do they need to submit a request?
What are your priorities with regard to having us document that they attended a training, even though there was a cost? That's
And I shared with Michelle that at Intercog, we required documentation for every travel because we wanted to keep track of the training records. Michelle said that often department heads keep track of the training, but perhaps not all department heads. I don't know the answer to that. So the bottom line is it's important for us to keep track of all training for all employees. And David, I know you had wanted to make a comment.
Well, my only comment is that individual departments, if the training is required for their certification, they should be keeping track of that, and the individual employees should be keeping track of their training also, because that's part of their own personnel file. So I don't think it's Michelle's responsibility or the council's responsibility or any other department besides the department the employee works at to maintain training records and keep track of their training. I mean, that department and the employee itself.
Michelle, what if we said that we would require the travel request only if there's an expense involved?
That's fine. That's up to you guys. So you can do that.
Okay, what does everybody think? Let me start with you, Margaret. What do you think?
I'm okay with that. I'm a little concerned about every individual department maintaining those kinds of records and us not having a master list of some kind, because what do you do if there's a conflict and the administrator never kept good records?
But as David said, it is to the benefit of the employee. They should be keeping track of their training records as well.
To jump in off of my colleague from Ward 1, I would agree that we should have a record. One, because it might be a case where there's a conflict and person A says one thing, person B says something different. I think in terms of just us being open and transparent, I think that we should know what's happening and that there should be some record of that. Yeah, it's more paperwork, but I think that's good because it makes sure that we do have an accurate representation of the time that our employees are spending. Because if we don't have a record of that and then all of a sudden says something that they don't know they're supposed to be, it can get difficult if we don't have a record. And I fully support employees being required to document it, government being required to document it. But we also know that we are all fallible beings, and so I think having that final layer doesn't hurt.
Sharon.
Great. Jerome.
One of the things that I thought I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, is there is no requirement of the department heads to keep records of training. And in my mind, if that's the case, there should be some form or something to where they have to be able to show the training that they send their people out for. It shouldn't just be, okay, we send them out for training, no documentation, no record of it or anything. That's just me. It's not the way that it should be. It should be a part of their responsibility.
I would agree. Ray, did you want to make a comment? Okay, okay. Pat, what do you think?
All training should be documented, put in the employee personnel file for their own benefit.
Okay. And should they have to submit a travel request even if there's no expense involved?
I would say it's good now.
Okay.
It's why.
Okay. Other than it would possibly document a training, but
So the documented training is like you, being at the training, putting it in the personnel record.
okay. Okay, even if there's not an expense form, right?
It's
Yes,
still
I think-
training.
Okay, I guess you'll need to take that up with human resources or the department directly then if you want to create a new form to document that.
But can't the expense form be the documentation?
Well, I think that's probably kind of how we've used it. I don't know that they've gone to employees' personnel files in the past, but those forms are certainly available, to see if someone's gone to a training.
Yeah. And I shared with Michelle and David, I had an employee who decided to go to Upper Iowa to finish their degree. And it was very helpful to them to have all the training documentation in a file. Didn't have to be a personnel file, but in a file, because that entitled him to credit that he was able to earn through Upper Iowa. So it's in the employee's benefit as well to keep those training documents available. So where are we here, guys? Am I hearing that if travel out of county has no expense, then there'll be no expense form required? That's what I'm hearing everybody say. Conversely, if there's an expense out of county, then you have to have an expense form. Okay? All right. We're going to try to get through one more, and then it is fine with me, if it's okay with the rest of you, that we'll schedule another work session to finish this up. But right now, the next one, number 9, is request required if over $100, even if only for the cost of a webinar. And we've seen probably a lot of that recently where we've had a lot of training for our employees. If the only cost is a webinar, it kind of goes back to the previous issue. That's training. And there might be an expense of $200. Even if it's just a webinar with no travel or no meals, should we still have a travel request form? And right now it's at 100. Should it stay at 100?
Madam Chair,
David, do you want to address that first?
Yeah.
This is your issue.
I asked to have it increased because right now anything under $100, Michelle and the mayor sign off on. Anything over $100 has to go before the finance committee and the full council. And I think when a person's taking an examination for a licensee for the building department, or a fire inspector, or you're attending a webinar in your office, I think it's silly to require us to have a travel request for that. When we technically aren't traveling, we're doing it in our office. I think that $100 should be raised anyway, because I think $100 is a really small amount that has to go for the main council. That's my own personal opinion. But I truly believe that on something that you're going to do in your office, attend a class in Waterloo, let's say a code update for the inspectors, and they're going to attend a class at the Sullivan Brothers, and it's $110. That's got to go before the full council.
Okay, and let me interject, David, with that. This goes back to the finance committee recommendation. And number 2 on that was review travel requests, anything over $100. So that's what the finance committee recommended. If you want to just carve out something for webinars, I don't think
I was just actually
that's what you're saying. I think you want to move the whole thing to 200, right?
Yes. I'd actually like to throw 500 myself, but that's just me.
Okay.
think $100 is such a small amount that has to go before the finance committee and has to go before the council. And keep in mind, if it's a webinar, no matter what it is, and I'll give you a quick example. No matter what class I attend, just because you went to the class doesn't mean that you passed or even attended the class. You just went. When I get my certificate of completion, I make a copy of it. One goes in my personnel file, one stays with me that I keep all the time for my own file. And those are the way we keep records. That was brought up earlier. But I just think $100 for travel and training is such a ridiculously low amount, and that's just my own personal opinion.
And with that said, David, I would also add that if we changed our threshold to 200, that would still mean the department would need to fill out the travel request. It would go to Michelle. Michelle would need to get that approved with the mayor.
Right.
It just would not come to the council, right?
That's all I'm trying to do is just streamline the process so that we're not inundated with a bunch of requests for small amounts when this could be handled by walking across the hall and getting a signature or an electronic signature. We do have an electronic form. Email the mayor, he checks the box and good to go,
So number 9 is really bigger than just webinars. If we changed the finance committee recommendation to 200 versus 100, you'd be happy with that, right?
It'd be a start.
Okay. All right. Margaret, what do you think?
I agree with Mr. Boson. And I also think webinars ought to be a whole separate section where no travel form is filled out at all, because it's kind of an oxymoron. You're not traveling. It's an educational
Except
opportunity.
you are training. This is travel and training policy. So
Right.
maybe we misstated. It's more than just travel.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, gotcha. Well, I agree with
Okay.
Mr. Boson.
Okay, so 200. Jonathan, what do you think?
I'm going with the 200. And I think this does kind of point out with the webinar, like Mrs. Klein said, that maybe we need some form or something for trainings that people fill out, because, like you said, if I'm when I'm in my office doing a planning thing and it's not really it's not over $200, how do we document that that thing is happening so people know? So maybe we need to look at something else. But for this policy, I'm telling you $200.
Okay. Yeah, Ray.
I agree. I think with the $200, it makes sense and can kind of the things that we're doing. I think that we want to make sure there is documentation of the trainings and stuff like that, but having something separately for any kind of online training, I could see that's going to be a ways of the future. So and people will kind of do those more and more and more. So we might as well catch up.
Okay. Jerome.
I'm fine with the $200, Sharon. As far as I'm concerned, you could probably go higher than that simply because of the fact I'm hearing that it's still got a process that it has to go through. The only thing that is happening is it's a dollar amount that the council won't have to worry about approving. Right. So yeah, I'm fine with the 200. If it needs to go higher eventually, I don't have a problem with that either.
And I would agree with you, Jerome, other than keep in mind by coming to the council, it is more transparent to the public. So,
well, and I understand that, Sharon, but keep in mind that the public still has the ability to see this stuff going on. It's just the council is not in the process of the approval of it. It's still transparent. It's still there for people to see. It's not like it's going away.
Okay. Pat.
Well, first of all, my understanding is that what I heard is that the only change that you're asking for in here is that the dollar amount that would be the limit or the threshold for the council approved in finance committee would be raised. Is that correct?
Right, 200.
Other than that, the entire process stays the same.
Right, right. And I think that the issue of the webinar is maybe a different issue, that maybe I would like Michelle to consider and come back to us with a recommendation there. Michelle, are you okay with that?
Sure.
Sure.
And we can think about that more, or if the $200 will, I think, take care of most of the ones I see. I know I just did a couple of classes that were converted to virtual that were probably more than that. But
Yeah.
there probably aren't that many, so that might, it will reduce the amount that can.
So Sharon, continuing
Yes.
on with what I was going to say is that I see city in there, whether it's $50, it has to do with training, it has to do with something that a person who's employed by the city of Waterloo, the city of Waterloo, I see that as a feather in that person's cap, something that they, I would hope would be proud of, and to have their name recognized in public to the finance committee, that this is what they're doing to enhance, and what the citizens of Waterloo are paying to enhance their work as being something of a positive show. It's almost like having somebody appointed to a committee, and they're at council, and they stand up and they get acknowledged. So granted, all these people on finance that are having these requests are not there and not standing up, but at the same time, what they are is that they're verbally acknowledged that they're attending a conference training so the people of Waterloo see that. So I'm not in favor of using any dollar amount because I see it as a very positive recognition of our public employees.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is everyone except Pat wants to move it to 200. Pat, you'd like to keep it at the 100, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I am going to suggest that we adjourn this at this point and ask Kelly to put another work session on so we can get to the rest of the items. I ask everybody to study this in the meantime. And with that, I ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, and just as an aside, if anyone has any other comments, I would welcome hearing them. Thank you very much. Okay, we got a 1-minute break, guys. Everyone to the Waterloo City Council Finance Committee. May we have roll call, please?
Mr. Morrissey,
Here.
Mrs. Jewin,
Here.
Mrs. Klein.
Here.
May I have a
To
motion?
approve the agenda in the minutes on May 26, 2020 is proposed.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Motion carries. Would somebody take the travel request and the pre-authorization, please?
Madam Chairwoman, the first,
Yeah.
the first travel request is for Greg Allhelm, building official. It's a class meeting, CEU Authority Mechanical Update class. Destination is online, June 9th through 2020, in amount not to exceed $275. The second one is Scott Buchan and Kelby Haynes, electricians. It's the American Signal Early Warning Siren Training in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, June 8th through the 10th, 2020, in an amount not to exceed $890. Then the pre-authorizations to expend over $1,000 are: number 3 is the airport in an amount and estimated shipping and handling of $3,520. It's for the replacement of sprinklers, antifreeze solution, and annual inspection. Number 4 is the airport in an amount and estimated shipping and handling of $6,600 for additional inlet and 12-inch storm sewer north of overhead door on west side of hangar number 4. Number 5 is the garage in an amount and estimated shipping and handling of $2,360. It's for a transmission kit for animal control van. Number 6 is leisure services in an amount and estimated shipping and handling of $3,728. It's for 16 sections of Hubble ADA sidewalk cord covers to use at events held at Lincoln Park. Number 7 is the police in an amount and estimated shipping and handling of $2,012 plus $312 for the shipping and handling. It's for traffic cones for precision drivers training for the police department. Number 8 is traffic, and it's also in an amount and estimated shipping and handling of $1,200 plus $200 for the shipping and handling. And it's for 200 18-inch orange traffic cones. And finally, number 9 is also traffic in an amount and estimated shipping and handling of $4,300. It's for 200 1 3/4 12-foot steel posts and 25 2-inch 12-foot posts.
Is there a second? Okay, discussion, I would ask, is Mr. Caspary there? Keith?
I am.
I question number 4. When I looked at the form, don't we have to put things out like that for bid? And just the fact that they were on site, does that waive our need to get the lowest bid?
Honestly, Sharon, instead of waiting, on another week or so to receive additional bids, I made the decision to have the work completed. And we had men and equipment already on site ready to do the work. It was installed the following day, so I made the decision at my level to have that work done. Additional justification is such that for years we've had a real poor problem with due to the grade between Hangar 4 and the airport fire station. We've had some problems over the many years that we've had a lot of water ponding in that area of the access to that area of the airfield. So I would like and support, please, the expenditure at $6,600.
Does this mean, did I hear you say the work's already been done?
Work's already been done. That's correct.
Okay, then I'm sorry, Keith, it's going to seem I'm picking on you, and I'm not. This is education for me. I did not know the department has the ability to have the work done without it going through finance and without a bid. So who can answer? Michelle, are you the one to address that, or where do I need clarification?
Well, and our finance committee policies and the purchasing policy would tell you that we really don't have the authority to do that. Sometimes if there's an emergency, we'll have a department head talk to you and me at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and still put it on the next Monday, but we might kind of get some pre-approval verbally, but I don't know that we have anything really.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mrs. Klein.
what was the date that this was done?
Let me look at the calendar for the month of May, and I would most likely, I'd have to look at my request from Benton Sand and Gravel. I would suspect it was done on or about, I think it was Monday the 18th of May.
I have a follow-up question. Did the company have a contract with the city, and did they have insurance?
They have insurance, and it was not a contract. This is signed with the city. It was a contract that was with Osprey Aviation to continue work on the site prep for the construction of that hangar.
So the contract was between the airport hangar owners and them. We had no agreement with them at all. We didn't even have the insurance.
I can get a copy of the insurance if necessary, but I made the decision at my level, since we had men and equipment on site ready to do the job, instead of trying to secure the services of a separate contractor to get the work done. And I felt that since they were already doing some work in that area, that it could justify the use of that contractor to get the actual work completed.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Morrissey.
Yeah, Keith, I was just doing it this way to cost favor to me.
I'm sorry, say that again, Mr. Morrissey.
Keith, Director Caspari.
Yeah.
Doing it the way that you did, with the timeliness and the need to make a decision, was that a cost favor?
I would say yes, because there was already existing work being done on that site, and they had the drain inlet installed within 2 days. So again, I just thought it was worthwhile in a time savings format to direct the contractor to proceed with the work. And I have pictures, if those are necessary. I can forward those to you all. But I made the decision at my level to get the work done in an expedited fashion.
And Mr. Kaspari, I understand the situation you're in. I will tell you, I feel very uncomfortable with this, that we've approved something. You say it's probably cheaper, but we don't know that because we have no other bids, and we didn't ask for any bonds or insurance coverage. Mrs. Klein, what are your thoughts?
I'm with you. I'm with you, Madam Chairwoman. From the beginning of my term, I was uncomfortable with things that came on the agenda for approval that were already finished.
Madam Chair?
I'd like to have
Yes,
a phone
Mrs.
call.
Morrissey?
Director Caspari, what would have been the scenario? You would have had to drop everything and not make your executive decision, but instead wait until this was brought to council for their decision.
I would have had to leave an open trench, and to me, that's not a safe practice to continue. We're also in the process of restoring water to the airport fire station, whereby we had water out of the airport fire station to replace a significant section of water main to the fire station, which provided water to the fire station.
And how soon after this decision is made, did you come to the Michelle or the mayor or whoever to let know that you had made this decision?
I knew that it was going to have to come across
the finance committee and made a request through Michelle's office via an expenditure authorization request to get it on the council agenda. The
And how
finance
soon after you make your executive decision is that done?
Probably within 2 or 3 days.
Okay, thanks.
Madam Chair?
Madam,
Oh,
yeah,
This is fine, this is fine.
let's go to Mr. Boson first. He hasn't had a
Okay.
chance.
Mr. Boson,
I know I'm not on the finance committee, but I truly believe that this whole thing could have been resolved with 2 phone calls. One to you, one to Michelle, and we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
because we can and have approved emergency situations, unusual situations, that we approve them, the work is done prior to finance. That did not happen. This is fine.
No, Mr. Boson spoke just exactly what we've had a phone call or an email this last week, or I think I got a text actually, from one of the department heads that had an emergency. And I so much appreciate being notified so that it doesn't catch me by surprise.
And that follows the policy that we do have for emergency. So I guess what I'm going to recommend, I'm sorry, Mr. Morrissey? Yes.
Well, the fact remains is that it sounds like there's a bill there for $5,600, and we might not like the way that this went down, but still there's a bill there
Yeah.
that needs to be paid. As far as any admonishment about the procedure to getting it done, I guess that can be handled by the mayor and Director Kaspari. But still, we have an outstanding bill that we
And I agree with you, Mr. Morrissey, and in fact, I was just going to say that my recommendation is going to be that because the bill has already been incurred, we have a vendor that is due money, that we would approve it, admonishing Mr. Kaspari to be mindful of the fact that we should go out for bid wherever possible, and that when it is an emergency situation, I'm not sure this is an emergency, but if it is emergency, they contact Mrs. Weidner and myself or other members of the finance committee in advance. That's a pretty
Kelly, this is
lengthy
Jerome. Are you in the
motion.
chambers?
Yep.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, Mr. Amos? Is that you, Jerome? Who said something just now?
Mr. Amos just spoke.
Mr.
didn't
Amos,
catch
I
what you
didn't hear what you said.
Madam
Jerome?
Chair, Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Morrissey?
I just wanted to add that I don't know if I misheard, when the council person Ward 1, said number 8, I thought I heard her say $200 shipping and handling. I just want to make sure the record correctly states that that's the number 8, $250 shipping.
Yep, that's
Good,
what I
thank
had her
you
down
for
as saying.
clarification. Okay, what do people think about my suggestion that we approve it since the work has already been done? But just ask not only Mr. Kaspari, but all department heads that we need bids and advance notification. Is everyone okay with that?
I just called the question.
Okay, but with that side note, if we will. So, all in favor of the motion approving travel requests and pre-authorization? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Would somebody take other committee business, please?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Morrissey.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the following other city business. First, a refund request in the amount of $75.15 for garbage collection fees, building mail on a property at 126 Lincoln. Next, a refund request in the amount of $34.40 for garbage and yard waste collection fees, building air on property located at 5483 Summerlin Drive. Next is a refund request in the amount of $10 for recycling services fees, bills, and air on property located revenue. Next, the refund requesting amount of $9.40 for extended yardway service fees, building error on a property located at 3151 Marigold Drive. And next is the refund requesting amount of $305.30 for garbage collection fees, building error on a property located at 1626 Easton Street. And finally, a request by fire chief for permission to dispose of decommissioned ambulance.
Is there a second?
Yes.
Discussion? Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. And finally, for bills payment in the amount of $758,857.51 as in accounts payable dated June 1st, 2020, move to receive, place on file, and forward to the full council.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, guys.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me out there? All right. Madam Clerk, could you please read the agenda?
Mr. Bozen,
Here.
Mr. Amos,
Here.
Mr. Morrissey, Mr. Morrissey,
Here.
oh,
Here.
Mrs. Klein,
Here.
Mr. Foyce,
Here.
Mr. Greider,
Here.
Mrs. Jewin.
Here.
All right. If you would please join me in a moment of silence. All right, thank you. The pledge will be led by Kelly Felkley, City Clerk. One time, my hand was already.
Motion to approve the agenda as presented and the minutes of the May 26th, 2020 regular session as proposed.
Second.
Second.
That motion has been made with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I think we need maybe about one more aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. All right, so we have an agenda and we have approved the minutes. And just a little FYI, at 6:15, once the council meeting is done, we will have the swearing in. It doesn't require that we'll be in meeting, but we'll do the swearing in ceremony like right after the council meeting. So it'll be an opportunity for the press to ask a couple questions once we finish as well. All right. Right now it is oral presentations time. It is your opportunity to speak to non-agenda related items. And I know Mr. Amos had stated he had someone that wants to speak with regards to their truck wash, but I'm assuming that's on the increase, right, Mr. Amos?
That's correct, Mayor.
All right,
Correct.
so we will call Mr. Lafredo or Mrs. Lafredo a little bit later in the meeting during that time. But is there anyone that would like to address the council on non-agenda items?
Mr. Mayor?
We have a citizen coming up, Mr. Morrissey. Just 1 second.
Okay.
With our problems that we've got going across here, our sicknesses and stuff. Really proud of the city of Waterloo for standing tall. Everybody's pretty much cooperating very well, and I hope we stay that way. I have a question. I sat into this meeting a little bit before this and was listening to some of our travel requests and department heads and things, and have the idea that maybe if we could get a travel agent or a travel agency involved, it would relieve the pressure off the department heads trying to find places to be. You know, big cities and stuff require the knowledge and also the fact that most travel agents or agencies are going to get it a whole lot cheaper than just one individual or maybe the city. Second would be the possibility of like a carpool. If people need to use the cars that next morning, that the cars be fueled and dropped off here or something to that effect the evening before, and then they also could be picked up the next morning through our carpool setup or our shop. Just little ideas here and there. You know, it's like, as I told Kelly, we can't expect our key employees to be staying at Motel 6 if everybody's over here at a whole lot better place. And we can't go clear across town and do all the other things and save very much money quite a bit of the time. Most travel agencies, the good ones, are going to know where to stay what the rental is for cars, how to take care of each other, and to make the city of Waterloo proud that, you know, we're representing this city. So, thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the city council? Going a second time. All right, Mr. Morrissey.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I was wondering if the swearing in, are we going to be allowed to stay on and be connected with that, or are we going to get shut off as soon as the council regular meeting is over?
I would never shut you off.
Yeah, we'll keep Zoom running.
We'll keep zooming.
Okay.
Yeah, because we also want to make sure that those that may not have been able to travel will be able to also take a look from wherever they're at as well. So definitely, we'll keep it out there for you. All right. Is there anyone? Yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
me?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to take this opportunity to say that on Friday night, I don't think I've ever been as proud of Waterloo as I was Friday night. We showed the rest of the nation how we can have discourse and discussion and protest and do it in such a meaningful manner with respect. Like I said, I was very proud of how we handled ourselves. The organizers of this are to be commended. I was so sorry that I couldn't participate, but in just viewing all of the videos of it, again, I felt very proud. I was very glad that our new incoming police chief participated. I think that was a credit to all of us. But again, thanks to everyone involved. You made me very proud.
All right. And
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I can't breathe. And that phrase has a lot of meaning here in modern America. Uttered by George Floyd and Eric Garner, it has come to tragically encapsulate the violence against African Americans by the very powers that are supposed to protect and defend them. There's a problem in America, and that problem is that we do not value Black lives the same way that we value other lives. Ground into the mortar of our national foundation are Black lives, Black hopes, and Black dreams. So even while claiming that all men are created equal and endowed with certain unalienable rights, we as a nation have long proven that not all men or women are created equal, and that some rights, a lot of rights, are in fact alienable by those with power. On Friday, I joined the peaceful march with thousands of my brothers and sisters from across the Cedar Valley. We heard powerful pleas for peace, for life, for security. And we were charged to do all that we can to eradicate the systems of racism and white supremacy that permeate our structures of power. We were asked to ensure that Black lives actually do matter here in Waterloo and elsewhere in the Cedar Valley. And this is personal to me because George Floyd sits in my classroom. So did Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor. So did Eric Garner and Michael Brown and Trayvon Martin and Freddie Gray and Tony McDade and Tatiana Jefferson and Sandra Bland. They've all been in my class, full of laughter and hope and love, motivated by dreams and hopes and fears just like any other child. But they live a different life than my child, than my two daughters. But they are just as much my children as my two biological children are. They are this community's children, and we owe it to them, all of our children of all colors, to fulfill finally the promise enshrined in our nation that we are all equal and all have inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that means that we must ensure that Black lives matter. And that requires action, not just words. It's no longer enough, especially from white politicians like myself, who have never known the fear of being pulled over, who have never been followed through a store because someone thought we were going to steal something, who have never known a brother or sister or father or mother or uncle or aunt, who have their lives snuffed out by the forces of protection, to continue to issue platitudes and promises. We need to take immediate action to begin dismantling the power structures that value some more than others because of the color of their skin. So today I'm laying down a marker for myself and for all of us. Over the next few months, I'll be working with you, Mr. Mayor, my fellow councilors, the Human Rights Commission, the police department, including our new police chief, and community activists to begin that process. Over the next few weeks and months, I will seek to introduce a series of reforms to ensure that Waterloo is at the cutting edge of equality as we should be. I can say that we should immediately pursue the full implementation of the racial equity toolkit to ensure that the very things that build our community ensure that we are all equal and not unequal. We should look at passing a racial profiling ordinance as well as other reforms that truly and firmly establish equality within our community. But we also need to ensure that the ordinances and resolutions that we pass lead to de-escalating situations between civilians and police, and we can start doing that work later tonight. But now is the time for action. Now is the time for hard conversations, and now is certainly the time for the hard work so that we can meet the challenges of today. Now is the time to make absolutely sure that Black Lives Matter here in Waterloo. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the council that would like to address us all?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Morrissey.
I know I'd ask that question, but I just wanted to echo what council person Ryder had said. We have had the Racial Equity Social Justice Toolkit brought to the council before with only questions asked. And I believe it's time. We have a Fair Chance Initiative that is going to go into effect in a month from today, in matter of fact. And we need to have that Racial Equity Social Justice Toolkit in place. And I would just ask for Director Funches, for he and the commission to bring that to the council, for the council to take a look at and make that a policy of the city of Waterloo for future budgets, programs, and projects, as well as any future ordinances or resolutions. And then secondly, just like to say that I would like to see a racial profiling ordinance put in place that would be somewhat similar to what Des Moines has had for themselves. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Amos.
Wasn't going to say anything. I just haven't been the march that happened. I physically wasn't able to participate in that, but I do know that my spirit is with the citizens of this community. And to my fellow council members, thank you so much for speaking up. You don't know what that means to myself and people who look like me. So just thank you.
Well, and what I'll probably say too, excellent comments by everyone. But what I want to do is make sure that we will be swearing in a new chief tonight that has been to multiple places around this United States and has worked in communities like ours. I think before we start pushing too many things, we start to get the input of our chief and from what he's seen as well before we start creating things for the department. He may have some familiarity already. So yes, toolkit, everything, all that. And the season is right now. And as Jerome said, it is good to where you have some of our other colleagues to start to step up and start to speak up as well, instead of being sometimes the only voice in the room. So I want to thank all of you. I believe we have an incredible start from some of the things we've already done, but we know there's so much more work that needs to be done within our local community to make sure we can just move from being one of the most diverse communities, but being to one of the most inclusive communities. And we have some willing bodies and willing people, and we have a community of people that are willing to support in all these efforts too. So I want to thank you for bringing those things forward, and I am looking forward to doing a lot of what was mentioned already as well. But yes, ma'am.
Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I just add, I appreciate Mr. Griner's comments, but as you said, I think we need to get the input of our new police chief. I would also like to ask, remember we have a citizens advisory committee that we've been working on getting it started, and I think to bypass them would be an insult. We need to benefit from their input and guidance as well before we get too far ahead of this. So thank you.
And that's exactly my point. We have a lot of tremendous things taking place. We have a lot of tremendous things that have kind of been on the back burner. We need to take a holistic approach. Everything that's mentioned needs to be incorporated. Strategically, how we move forward and do those things, I think we need to work together. We have willing people internally. We're bringing in experience in a wide range of areas. And I think this is the time, as Mr. Grider said, this is the time for us to continue to push even forward. So the next 90 to 120 days are going to be fast-paced. There's going to be a lot of incredible things taking place, but we just all need to be on one accord. And like I said, I'm hearing a very willing council, which is amazing. So I'm looking forward to how quickly we're going to move. Anyway, if there's no other council member that has not spoken, I'd accept. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say that these past few days have just been heartbreaking. And I have an extremely large family, an extended family that lives in town, and we look like a lot of the society looks today. And it made me want to go to every one of them and hug them tight and keep them close in safety. And my only thing is this must never happen again. It must never happen again.
All right. Thank you. Mrs. Ewan.
Yes, motion to close the oral presentations, receive the comments, place on file, and place on file. That's the motion.
Second.
All right. That motion has been made with second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
Motion to approve the consent agenda by adding to 1A1 the bill's payment in the amount of $758,857.61. Receive, approve, and place on file.
Second.
All right. That motion has been made with the second. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Bozen?
Yes.
Mr. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey?
Yes.
Mrs. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Foyce?
Yes.
Mr. Grider?
Yes.
Mrs. Jewin?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Let me see anything. All right. Could someone take number 2, please?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Morrissey.
I'd like to, excuse me, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file proof publication, a notice of public hearing on the adoption of an updated multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan for Blackhawk County, Iowa.
Second.
That motion has been made with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The hearing is now open. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the hazard mitigation plan? Going a second time. There's no second time. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to close the hearing.
Second.
Second.
That motion has been made with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. The hearing is now closed.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt a resolution adopting the updated multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan for Blackhawk County, Iowa.
Second.
That motion has been made with the second. Very quickly, there were a number of mistakes that were in that plan that needed to be updated. Noel or Eric or anyone, are you on the line right now?
There's no line here.
Did Mr. Bozen's corrections get put into that plan?
And Noel Anderson, Community Planning Development Director, we did receive the email from Mr. Bozen, have conveyed that to Intercog staff, and they are working to make those corrections.
So but are we approving right now, are we approving the current plan or the updates? Can you please come up, sir?
This is the most updated plan. I mean, really, the corrections that'll be in there will just be some minor numbers and a couple of fact check type things. So I think we'd be fine to go ahead and approve the plan with this, knowing that there's a couple of details that'll be finalized, really updated water numbers and things like that.
But what about what about contact numbers for businesses that are no longer in existence? Contacting like a particular school that's not even, I don't even think it's been shoveled, it's been already torn down. Like, what are those corrections in there as well that Mr. Bozen had sent to us?
The staff at Intercog did contact the Waterloo schools to get the most recent updates on those, and those will be incorporated in as well for the submittal to the state.
So I'm hearing, yes.
I apologize for interrupting, but I'm really, and I sent this email to Noel a few weeks ago, and I'm really disappointed in this plan. And I have a real problem voting on a plan that these changes are going to be put in at a later date. I mean, they quoted 2009 waterworks, they quoted 2007 crash statistics. That's not an updated plan to me. This thing is so outdated. I mean, they listed Northwest Airlink as our air carrier for Waterloo. I'm extremely disappointed, and I for one will not vote on this tonight until an updated plan comes that has pertinent information in it. I read 526 pages. I don't know what was wrong in the Cedar Falls, Dunkerton, Evansdale, Hudson portions of it, but I can tell you there's 2 pages of errors that I specifically pointed out on Waterloo's response to hazard mitigation.
Mr. Anderson?
We can definitely table it tonight and wait to get the updated version in the next week or so from Intercog. I mean, obviously, Intercog is going with the dates and the facts that they were given to them by the various departments that put all this together. So we've reached out to those departments again with Intercog to try and get updated information in this large plan.
I think that's probably an appropriate idea to wait to make sure we have things updated. We do have a meeting. One thing about us, we have meetings every week, like no other city in the state. But I think we probably need to wait until those changes, until Mr. Bozen and others are secure that those changes have been implemented. Mr. Morrissey.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make or suggest that a motion be made to postpone this until our June 22nd meeting.
Second.
That motion, what's next week?
Next week is the 8th.
The second to last. That's the 4th Monday in June.
That timetable, do we have another week left? We can table it one more week. Do we have until the 22nd, Mr. Anderson?
I believe we can make that work, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion to table. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Amos?
Postpone, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Postpone.
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey?
Yes.
Mrs. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Foyce?
Yes.
Mr. Greider?
Yeah.
Mrs. Jewin?
Yes.
Mr. Bozen?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Could someone take number 3 and 4?
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Klein.
the number 3 is a resolution approving supplemental agreement number 1 to the professional services agreement with MMS Consultants, Inc. of Iowa City, Iowa, originally executed December 3rd, 2018, in the amount of $2,500 in conjunction with the platting of Northeast Industrial Park Number 4 and authorizing the mayor to execute said document. And number 4 is a resolution approving an amendment to the professional services agreement with Envision Architecture of Waterloo, Iowa, originally executed September 9th, 2019, in the amount of $82,800 in conjunction with the Waterloo Center for the Arts Parking Redevelopment Project Phase 3 and authorizing the mayor to execute said document.
Second.
That motion has been made with the second. Is there anyone that would like to comment on this particular item on the agenda? Council? Madam Clerk?
Mr. Morrissey?
Yes.
Mrs. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Foyce?
Yes.
Mr. Greider?
Yes.
Mrs. Jewin?
Yes.
Mr. Bozen?
Yes.
Mr. Amos?
Yes.
All right, thank you. 5 and 6, please.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Bozen.
I'd like to make a motion to approve a resolution approving a construction agreement with the Waterloo Waterworks Board of Trustees in conjunction with the FY 2020 Leversley Road Sanitary Sewer and Water Main Improvements Project Contract Number 987 and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute said document. And number 6 is resolution approving supplemental agreement number 1, the professional service agreement with H.R. Green of Cedar Rapids, Iowa, originally executed April 6, 2020, in the amount not to exceed $89,214.75 in conjunction with the FY 2021 Charlotte Road Reconstruction, Test Road to Highway 218 Contract 1020, and authorizing the mayor to execute said.
Second.
That motion has been made with the second. Anyone like to comment on these items? Council? Madam Clerk? Huh? Is there someone?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Morrissey?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Yes, so number 6, I'd like to know what that brings that total to and how is that being paid for?
All right, we got anyone from AECOM or Jamie, are you on the line? No, you have that? I don't see anyone from AECOM on here, is there?
Jamie, you're muted.
Jamie here?
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, sorry about that. Jamie Knudsen, city engineer. With this agreement, we will be up to a not to exceed $544,971.75 for design. And currently this is going to be paid out of bond funds.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
This Hess Road thing, I don't know. Maybe this isn't the time to ask it, but how are we doing on the West Ridgeway program? And is any of this involvement with Hess Road detracting from the West Ridgeway project? Is there any connection to that in any regard?
Connection between these two projects?
Or the monies? Seems like we've been waiting on West Ridgeway a long time, and those neighbors are very antsy about it.
Jamie, Noel, any connection to the other project? And if you have a status or an update on the project she's talking about.
I can start and Jamie can probably jump in too. I mean, so the West Ridgeway project I know was initiated somewhat by traffic, looking at some different alternative for some intersections there. So we'd like to continue to move ahead, working with them on what intersection improvements might be warranted out there based on the numbers of turns and crashes and data that they're looking at there. And then moving ahead with probably following up with those intersections, then with a redesign of West Ridgeway as is warranted, whether for a 4-lane or a 3-lane design, again, based on more of the traffic data being assembled.
Yeah,
I
know
that.
So we're not ready. So we haven't started bonding for that project yet, right? Or any money attached to it yet?
I know the people that have been contacting me about it recently have talked about the condition, and I drove down that road the other day. It is in really bad condition. And they weren't talking about just the intersections because they were all at those meetings, you know, we put on all those meetings about what they wanted to have happen there. And they just feel like it's getting lost in the shuffle. And now we hear all about Hess Road coming out and, you know.
So of course, you know, these are two different projects, but what we need to do is maybe you and Jamie can have some communication about where we're at with that road. So Jamie, if you want to reach out to Councilwoman Klein or traffic or create that email stream just to see where we're at or try to get some type of acknowledgement of where that would be at in the future so people know. So All right,
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs.
Mr. Mayor.
Mrs. Jewin.
Yeah, on the Ridgeway, we authorized a study.
Yeah, I'm trying to move off the Ridgeway kind of because we're talking
know.
about Hess
I
Road.
hear you.
And
I'm just asking that Mr. Knudsen, as he's looking at Ridgeway, give us an update on where the study is.
all right, thank you. All right, any other questions? Madam Clerk?
Mrs. Klein,
Yes.
Mr. Foyce,
Yes.
Mr. Greider,
Yes.
Mrs. Jewin,
Yes.
Mr. Bozen,
Yes.
Mr. Amos,
Yes.
and Mr. Morrissey.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Could someone take number 7, please?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Foyce.
I'd like to make a motion to receive, file, consider, and pass for the first time an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinance of the City of Waterloo by repealing Title I, Administration, Chapter 8, Municipal Finances, Section 1, Deeds and Contracts, subsection B, Execution of Contracts in its entirety, and enacting in lieu thereof a new Title I, Administration, Chapter 8, Municipal Finances, Section 2, Deeds and Contracts, subsection B, Execution of Contracts, and enacting a new Title I Administration, Chapter 8, Municipal Finances, Section 6, Electronic Records and Signatures.
Second.
Second.
All right, that motion has been made with the second. Questions on these items from anyone? Council? Madam Clerk?
Mr. Foyce,
Yes.
Mr. Greider,
Yes.
Mrs. Jewin,
Yes.
Mr. Bozen,
Yes.
Mr. Amos,
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey,
Yes.
and Mrs. Klein.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules.
Second.
The motion has been made with the second. Council, I would ask, if at all you can find somewhere in the bottom of your hearts or maybe in the top part of your heart or the east or western section, if you could suspend this. One, because right now we have a situation where if I am not here or Kelly's not here, we have to wait till we get back into office to sign documents. So if you're away at conferences or you're not at work that day, there is no ability to be able to do that. I know my arms reach a long way, but not that far. So this is something that we really need to get started right away. And it's not because I had this right here, so not to say that I can't sign with my right arm, but we really need to move this forward. So, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Greider,
Yes.
Mrs. Jewin,
Yes.
Mr. Bozen,
Yes.
Mr. Amos,
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey,
Yes.
Mrs. Klein,
Yes.
and Mr. Foyce.
Yes.
Mr. Amos, you didn't sound too excited about that. All right, Mr. Foyce.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to receive, file, consider, and pass for the second and third times and adopt said ordinance.
Second.
That motion has been made with the second. Madam Clerk.
Mrs. Jewin,
Yes.
Mr. Bozen,
Yes.
Mr. Amos,
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey,
Yes.
Mrs. Klein,
Yes.
Mr. Foyce,
Yes.
and Mr. Greider.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Number 8, please.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Amos.
I'd like to make a motion to receive, file, and consider and pass for the second time an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances of the City of Waterloo, Iowa by enacting a new section 5-2-14, pedestrian safety use of medians.
Second.
That motion has been made with the second. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this particular item? Council, I know we'll have some healthy discussion.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Greider.
So here we are again, and I do want to iterate again that I oppose this ordinance for several reasons. First and foremost, I oppose this ordinance because while it is wrapped in the cloth of pedestrian safety, it doesn't do anything for pedestrian safety. As I iterated last week in the public data that the police have shared with us, 0% of the pedestrian fatalities in the last 10 years in Waterloo have happened anywhere near this area, and only 1.17% of pedestrian injuries in the last decade have happened in this area. while 64% of both of those statistics have happened in downtown. We have a pedestrian safety issue, but this does not address it. Also, after having reviewed public data on police calls in the area, this particular area that the ordinance is focused on accounts for only 0.5% of all police calls for the year 2019. And that's all calls. Pedestrian safety calls make up a mere 0.25% of that 0.5% for last year's. This is a solution in search of a problem. And even if we ignore the hard data, which sometimes we seem to want to do, even the anecdotes that were raised up to us last week as proving this problem don't actually prove it. Not one person, not the police officers, not the citizen who spoke, not my other council members, once spoke about seeing a pedestrian get injured at any of these intersections. What they talked about was the problem of hard stops or people blowing through red lights. And while those are problems, this again does not address those. And this ordinance does nothing to stop hard stops if panhandlers, who this ordinance is firmly aimed at, are moved from the median to the side of the road. It just moves it to a new area. Again, I will reiterate that this ordinance is not about pedestrian safety, but about people feeling comfortable and able to ignore the issue of poverty in America. In addition, last week I raised the very real First Amendment issues that this ordinance brings up. It was brought to my attention by the ACLU in conversations that I had with them and others that the city of Portland, Maine, tried to do almost this exact same thing. The only thing that changed were the street names. Turns out there's not a Bach Street in Portland. And in 2013, both a district and a federal appeals court found that the city of Portland had violated First Amendment rights because medians represent a traditional public fora where free speech cannot be amended. In addition, I spoke with my colleagues in the city of Cleveland, Ohio, who also passed a similar ordinance to this one. Cleveland also lost both of their cases while spending a cool $1.5 million fighting it. Now, Cleveland is 4 times our size, so let's say that our lawyer fees are a fourth of theirs. This isn't how it works. Those are billable hours, but let's do it for this thought experiment. That's $375,000 that I know and we know that the city of Waterloo does not have to fight a losing battle. I'm all for tilting at windmills when there's a chance that we will win, but we will not in this case. The Supreme Court, appeals court, district courts, and state courts have clearly said that public fora are open domains for the First Amendment. Finally, I campaigned to represent this area last year, and while I knocked thousands of doors and talked to dozens of small business owners in the area, the number of times that panhandlers in the medians was brought up was 0, which is the same percentage of pedestrian fatalities in this area, and only 1.17% less than the total pedestrian injuries in this area over the last decade. However, having not heard from it for a whole year of campaigning, last week I was inundated with 96 different forms of communication from my constituents about this ordinance. And this is what they said. Absolutely despicable that the city council is wasting time punishing poor people during an economic crisis. How tone deaf do our leaders have to be that with unemployment racing towards Great Depression level to punish those trying to provide for themselves and their families? Monumental waste of time and police resources. How messed up are our priorities? Now, in the issue of fairness, I would have mentioned pro-ordinance statements, except that out of the 96 communications, both email, text message, and phone calls, not one of my constituents was in favor of this ordinance, and these are people who live there and work there and drive there. And I agree with them that this is a colossal waste of time, and it is a disproportional response to a non-issue. I would like to ask my fellow council members if they know what a misdemeanor comes charged with in Waterloo. It is either a fine of up to $500 or 30 days in jail. How is that an appropriate response for someone sitting on a bucket? How is that a proportional response to someone holding a sign asking for help during an economic crisis, not of their own making? It's not. And we can say that we care about people, but words are easy. and I'm sorry if that seems harsh, actions matter, and we cannot care for those in need when we disproportionately punish them for asking for help. I have talked earlier about working to de-escalate the utilization of police and prioritize the use of Waterloo Police Department towards real issues that we have. This ordinance does not do that and has the potential to escalate a situation that we've seen engulf other cities in our nation. We have to do better, and Waterloo is better than this. I will be voting no, and I deeply plead that at least 3 of my colleagues will join me in banishing this unconstitutional waste of time to the dust of history. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
just a couple things. I too have been contacted by my constituents. Perhaps they contact the person that is most in line with their beliefs, because everyone that contacted me, with one exception, was in favor of the ordinance. What I would say is I think there are 2 issues here. For me, my reason for supporting this is indeed safety. The people that called me had safety issue. I have personally had safety issues, and that's the reason I'm supporting it. I am quite honestly offended by Mr. Griner's assumption or inference that people that support this ordinance don't care about poor people. There couldn't be anything further from the truth, and I've had years of service to this community that demonstrate my support for poor people. What I find interesting is I don't believe that allowing somebody to stand on median to collect money in a dangerous situation does anything to help people who are suffering in poverty. I would much rather think something more proactive, rather go out there and see exactly what services we can provide. It was suggested to me by one of my constituents that we should have a work session with some of the nonprofit groups in this community that truly work on a day-to-day basis with the people that are struggling. If we really want to make a difference, let's truly get out there, work with the organizations, provide assistance, and don't let them continue to sit on a bucket in a 1-foot median. Again, for me, it's a safety issue. Thank you.
All right, next,
Mr. Mayor, Dave Boson.
Mr. Bozen.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to vote in favor of this. I truly believe it's a safety issue. I absolutely do. I spent 34 years in public safety. I spent 10 years on the ambulance. I don't have to wait for someone to get hit or killed in that area to decide to create an ordinance or a ruling. Councilman Ryder mentioned misdemeanor. This is a municipal infraction. This is not something that's state or federal infraction. So I don't believe it falls under the misdemeanor on the fine or the 30 days in jail. I believe it's a safety issue. I truly do. I'm not against on what they're doing. People that are trying to make better for themselves, but I truly believe standing on a median in traffic is a safety issue. And like I said, I mean, we put smoke detectors in homes not because we're expecting to have a fire, in case we have a fire. And ordinance, whether it's constitutional or not, as Mr. Grider has said, is something that has to be big up. But here's the thing: our original ordinance, I really thought was going to deal with this, our solicitation ordinance. And then last week, when Major Libel got up and said we don't enforce it because we were told it's unconstitutional, that's another issue that I have, not with Major Libel, but if we have city ordinances that are since 2015 or longer that are deemed unconstitutional, I don't understand why they're still in our code of ordinances. Why we haven't worked to remove those. And if we have to do due diligence to go through our entire code of ordinances to figure out what needs to be updated or removed, I think that's something that we need to work towards.
All right, thank you. Next.
Mr. Mayor.
Who was that?
Mr. Boyce.
Hey, Mr. Foyce.
So I was a no on this last week, and I think, you know, kind of the opposite of Mrs. Jewin. People weren't aligned with my way of thinking and contacted me, and I had some very good conversations with constituents on this piece, and one in particular stands out. It was a lot about mental health, and the fact that you may have people out there that, you know, aren't able to have jobs because of something else that's going on in their life. And I can't, you know, and I've seen the rhetoric of, you know, these people get into nicer cars, they've got nicer shoes, I'm not the moral police. And if that's what they're choosing to do, then that's what they're going to choose to do. But to Mrs. Jewin's point as well, what I was told was that we have had some of our services go out and talk to these people, and they have adamantly turned them down, and that's unfortunate. So, you know, while I personally am opposed to this, my constituents are not, so I will be voting in favor of this tonight.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Amos.
This is another one of those where I'm listening to what Councilman Greider is saying as far as the zero fatalities, nothing happening. And I have not had a single person get in contact with me about this issue, but I do know that I drive that area, not on a regular basis, but when I do go out there and I see individuals out there, I empathize. But I also have a concern about their safety. You know, you talk about the perceptions that we have in this community. Well, for me, seeing those people out there, it's about safety. It has to be. You know, I understand their plight. You know, I asked that question last week about being able to stand on the side of the road. It's still, in my mind, a safety issue, but it gets them out of the middle of traffic, which is a concern for me. So that is why I will be voting in favor of this. My mind has not changed. I understand some of the perceptions that people may have as far as why this is being done, but I do not agree with those perceptions. For me, this is a safety issue.
Yes, anyone else?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Morrissey.
Mr. Mayor, I am against this probably more rapidly than I was even last week. First of all, nobody's discussing the fact that we have in our Code of Ordinances 3-4D-1 or Article D, solicitation of funds, which language is being used as a justification for creating this new one because that language is deemed unconstitutional. But yet we're not doing anything about that ordinance. You know, when you listen to other legislative bodies, if an issue like this comes up, they will usually defer to the whole concept of a rescind and replace, remove and replace. But we're not even discussing the unconstitutional ordinance that is being used as a justification to create this. One of the justifications. And then another justification that's being used, and the primary focus that people keep referring to, and I believe mistakenly, is that is for public safety. But yet, we have no statistics for the city of Waterloo that point to anybody soliciting for funds at any of these places has caused a fatality, let alone any wreck. Absolutely zero. But yet we're using public safety as a crux as to why we're going to justify doing this. So if the main reason is public safety, but we're using the cover of public safety to panhandle, then to eliminate panhandling at these places, what comes next? The next ordinance is going to deal with wherever they congregate again. Now, I heard the conversations about the poor, and I can commiserate with that. But I believe that all humans have inalienable rights. And one of those rights, which is ensconced in our Constitution, is the right to free speech. And in the court case that Councilman Greider had spoken about, it is Cutting versus Portland, Maine. And I will just quote to you part of that, the summary. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the First Circuit found that an ordinance passed in Portland, Maine, prohibiting any person to stand, sit, stay, drive, or park on a median strip, except that pedestrians may use median strips only in the course to crossing from one side of the street to the other, was facially unconstitutional under the First Amendment right to free speech. How can we as a council go ahead with something that has been, and we have documentation to show that it's been ruled unconstitutional? Councilman Greider also brings up what is happening in Cleveland, Ohio. Furthermore, if you look at this ordinance, I know that Councilman Bozen, and I greatly respect Councilman Bozen's opinion, but it does in this ordinance, if you approve it, it does include that the penalty is a misdemeanor, which, as Councilman Greider outlined, results in those kinds of penalties. And furthermore, within this ordinance, this proposed ordinance, it speaks to pedestrians. Okay, and pedestrians are defined as a person walking along a road or in a developed area. Okay, and in every one of the justifications underneath that, that's talked about in this ordinance, we use the term pedestrian. And so if you look closely at the ordinance as it's crafted, A 1 through 5 deals with pedestrians, but number 4 and number 5 specifically talk about Waterloo. But in number 4, the information given there does not speak to any of the intersections that are addressed in B or C. They're addressed to overall within the city, which is a generalization, not to the specifics. Furthermore, in number 5, it talks about the city engineer determining that these areas are not safe. But what again is that based on? You can't use statistics. 1 through 3 are statistics that was used by the city of Des Moines in crafting their ordinance, which we have modeled our ordinance after, Mr. Mayor. In looking at this ordinance, I believe that it's aimed particularly at the panhandling that's taking place in this area. And my question is, if we're all human rights advocates, and if we believe that we want the best for everybody in our society, then why aren't we as a council looking at the causative factors that create the need to panhandle, rather than covering it up by music? Well, rather than covering it up by trying to pass an ordinance that is going to push these people to another part of town. Panhandling is a symptom of a systemic societal problem, and declaring a public safety issue only without dealing with the underlying issue seems to be, as I said, a cover-up, a way to sweep this systemic and even our own city's issue under the rug. And I really ask this council to not proceed further with this, but to use what is happening here as a time to reflect. There's no need for a rush to judgment on this. I would hope that people that are in favor of this would ask themselves, what does this proposed ordinance solve? It doesn't solve anything that what's being looked at. I would hope that the council would look at what has happened in other cities as far as what has been declared unconstitutional, and just step back a minute. Maybe
Mr. Mayor.
we could postpone this for a few weeks or a couple of months, have some sessions on the causative factors of this, and see what we could come up with. If our budget is always concentrating on non-human service related things rather than looking at issues like this and how we as a community can resolve it, then I think we need to take another direction and reprioritize.
All right.
The
Thank you.
fact that we have not even done anything as far as getting some money to the warming center speaks to what our priorities are. And finally, and this is just a side note, if we're going to outlaw all along these intersections, and if we have a section in this code of ordinances proposed, that talks about the fire and police, that this doesn't apply to, I'd like to know if this language is also going to apply to the firemen when they're out there with their boots, or any other kind of organizing drive that is very useful and productive and meaningful for our community. But if we're going to say that it's outlawed for panhandlers in these areas, then it needs to be outlawed for all. So is this excluding the fire and police from using the intersections like they have done in the past?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Morrissey.
I would ask the council to vote this down, and if not, I would ask the council to suggest that we submit an amendment to postpone this until we've had further discussion dealing with the causative factors, and until we rescind a ordinance that has already been stated as a justification for this new one as being unconstitutional.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Has everyone has had an opportunity to speak except Mrs. Klein? Mrs. Klein.
I'll make it very fast. The reason I brought this forward to the council was because I got a call from an 86-year-old lady who'd been shopping out by Crossroads, and somebody lurched from that spot where they were panhandling and frightened her to death. And then I started listening to the neighbors, and I started asking questions, and more people began to come forward, and they said they had near-miss accidents, or they actually, in one case, one gentleman on a motorcycle bumped the car ahead of him because that guy stopped so fast to hand money. Now, I've had to sit through some discussions that suggested that I have an ulterior motive or that I don't like poor people for some reason. Well, those are spoken by people who don't know me, who did not know the circumstances of my growing up. We were very, very poor. My family was extraordinarily poor, and it's where I developed a fear of the knock on the door with the bill collectors. So I understand poverty. I understand food shortages. I understand it. And I'm not in any capacity asking to remove panhandlers from our city. I'm just saying, can we take them from the busiest point on those medians, those little bullet-nosed areas of the medians? Can we just move them to make the drivers feel safer and to make those people safer? Just move them over to the side of the road. This is not anti-panhandling. This is safety. Safety, it began, and safety it is here tonight. Thank you all.
So we have, I don't know if council's opinions are going to change or if there's more quotes that we'll be able to give Tim. This is one time, and I'll go to Mr. Greider directly after, because he did ask to speak. This is one time where I believe 100% that this had nothing to do with the fact that someone wants to eliminate the poorest within our communities. And, I had a conversation too, and let's be very careful about saying what the city of Waterloo does or not do. There's plenty of single mothers that are receiving assistance. There are plenty of people that need emergency assistance through our community development. And there are plenty of people that sit right here on this rostrum that have invested a lot in helping people. So let's be very careful about who we say supports what and does what. What we're dealing with right now are those with the least of these within our community that are sitting at a median. The medians, some of them are so skinny that you have to sit with your legs together so you don't get ran over by a car. And we don't create necessary policies to say something about, we talk about what could possibly happen. So if no one is hit, that is the grace of God. If no one was ran over, that is the grace of God. So the question that I'm not hearing, this is a systemic problem, as was mentioned by, I believe, Mr. Morrissey. But I've also reached out to our VA today to talk to them, because some of us within our communities that are there are having problems. So we reached out to the VA to figure out what can you do to actually help, to actually change someone's life. But I'm not hearing about solutions because whether they're in the median or not, that shouldn't be a sustainable way to earn income. We need to work with those that have programs and processes. Reached out to an area pastor today to see if they have a strategy team that can go and help change the condition that person is in. So this has nothing to do, like was stated, about sweeping something under the rug because people here don't care. This is sitting in a median that is too small. If you tip, the wind blows one way or the other, you can actually get ran over. So what about trying to work with social service agencies and those folks that do this for a living to see how we can actually bring some help so that they won't be in that condition? So Mr. Greider, I believe you have comments, but I don't necessarily think council's opinions are going to change. So it would be...
No, I believe that was... Mr. Mayor, I believe that was Mr. Amos who needed to make a comment. I'm finished.
All right. Mr. Amos.
Yeah, Mayor, I just, the comments that were made, I don't agree with a lot of them. Thank you for the comments that you made, but could we hear from Attorney Peterson as far as constitutionality and those things? Because I'm hearing that, but I'm not hearing from our legal.
And also, I'm also hearing a little bit earlier about our Human Rights Commission too. I think maybe we can also reach out to Mr. Funches as well to see if there's a connection that we can make to being able to help people in that condition. But Mr. Peterson, are you online?
I'm here, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yep. Constitutionality before we vote.
Yes, Mr. Morrissey was kind enough to communicate with me Friday and indicated that, he wanted me to address this 2015 Court of Appeals case from the First Circuit in Maine. And so I looked at that case, and as I understand the case, the facts of the case, they passed an ordinance that applied to every single median in their city without regard to the width. And the basis upon which it was struck down as unconstitutional was because it was too broad, that it wasn't as closely related to public safety as the court wanted. And so that's, as I understand it, the reason the statute, the ordinance was struck down. And so this has some stricter requirements with regard to the places that the ordinance applies to and the widths of the medians. So I'm comfortable with the ordinance as written. Of course, we know from other ordinances, no one can say with any certainty what a result is going to be in a court case. So I'm comfortable with the ordinance as drafted.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk.
Mr. Bozen?
You're muted, Mr. Boson.
Yes.
Mr. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey?
No.
Mrs. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Foyce?
Yes.
Mr. Greider?
No.
Mrs. Jewin?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Amos.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules.
Second.
Motion's been made with the second. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey?
No.
Mrs. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Foyce?
No.
Mr. Greider?
No.
Mrs. Jewin?
Yes.
And Mr. Bozen?
Oh,
All right, thank you. Last item on the agenda, number 9, sewer rate increase.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Amos.
I'd like to make a motion to receive, file, and consider and pass for the first time an ordinance amending Chapter 3 Sewer Regulations, Section 8-3A-6, sewer rental charge to increase sewer rates.
Second.
That motion has been made with the second. Do we have Mr. Lafredo online or on the phone?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
this is Craig Lafredo.
It's all yours.
Thank you very much for all of you for taking the time, and I appreciate you allowing me to call in and voice some concerns relative to the sewer rate increases. My wife and I purchased Vets Truck Wash in October of 2018. We're both Waterloo natives. I graduated from the great school of Waterloo East, and my wife graduated from Waterloo Central.
I'm sorry, I can't do that.
And we both are Hawkeye Tech folks. Moved away about 35 years ago and moved back here a few years ago. And the sewer rates last year cost our little business over $10,000 for the increases. This year, the proposed 6% is another $6,700. So in the matter of a short period of time here, our costs have went up by almost $17,000. And, you know, we're just a small business here. And, you know, what I read is that this measure is only going to increase the sewer bill on a per household basis $1.80 or $1.82 a month. My question is who's thinking and who's representing the small businesses that are impacted by these changes? And unfortunately, what I did get a chance to talk to several council people today, and what I thought I heard was that the reason these are going up so much is because the leadership in the past, and I'm paraphrasing here, this didn't keep up and do the things that they needed to do relative to the EPA. And believe me, as a recovering pig farmer, I understand working with the EPA. However, I just wanted to lift up that these are big numbers for small businesses, especially one like ours that we use a lot of water and use the sewer system. And I certainly want that as a consideration for these changes. You know, I knew, being from Waterloo, I knew that it is a tougher place, in my opinion, to have a business, but I didn't realize that these things were in the works. And really, frankly, if you add this to the COVID-19 stuff, which we're running for now 2.5 months at something less than 60%. This is pretty difficult, and I get it that we just have 10 employees, but you know, those people are important to us, and so I appreciated the earlier discussions around some of the ordinances and those things, and would hope, and I know hope is not an action, but would that similar discussions take place relative to raising the sewer rates.
All right. Thank you, Mr. LaFredo. And the thing about the sewer rates, we've been having these discussions for a couple years now. Our sewer rates and water rates are very competitive to other communities. But right now we're placed in a situation where we have a tremendous amount of work that need to be done, just like some of the surrounding communities, all the communities across the state and around the country as well. Michelle, or is it Randy, or who could just make a comment about why the need for the increase? Not all at once.
Michelle Weaver. This is Michelle Weaver. Let's see. Can you hear me?
Yes, we got you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Michelle Weidner, Chief Financial Officer. While none of us like to raise any rates, but the EPA has told us we have to make improvements, and we are entering into contracts to be in compliance with that. So we do have to have this rate increase to be able to pay our bills. I would like to point out, though, that I looked at the Ames sewer and water rate survey. Even after we pass this increase, we will be the 7th lowest of the 43 most populous communities in the state of Iowa with our sewer rate. And that's assuming they don't need to do any increases, which is probably not accurate. And we are 3rd lowest of the largest 11 cities. So I believe our sewer rates are still a good bargain for both residents and businesses. The reason I didn't give, an example of a business is because the usage varies so widely. So it's hard to come up with a typical commercial user. And I understand and empathize with this business owner. They do use water, and we knew bringing this right now with COVID was a difficult time, but we have talked about this at a number of work sessions, that we were going to have to do this effective July 1st so that we can pay our debt service on the improvements that we are required to make, which hopefully benefits all of us to keep our environment clean and functioning properly. And I don't know if Randy Bennett has anything else he'd like to add.
No, I think that was pretty good, Michelle. So I don't have anything else to add at this time.
All right. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this item? Some of you have kind of been here and heard these presentations before. Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Greider.
So I did speak with Mr. LaFredo earlier, and we had a really, open and honest conversation about the situation, and he understands it. But I think what this situation highlights, along with other things, whether it's the 5 Sullivan Center or other infrastructures, that we just need to be cognizant that while sometimes it might be easy to defer the costs later, as some of our predecessors long before any of us were here did, in the end, that stuff has to be made up for. We have to spend the money. So we can either do it a little bit at a time to keep ourselves in a good spot, or we can unfortunately mortgage the future, and eventually that bill comes due. So I think this is a really important lesson about how we just need to do the little things, the maybe not as big or glamorous things, to keep the city functioning, because if we don't, those costs eventually do come up.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else before we go to a vote? Madam Clerk?
Mr. Morrissey?
Yes.
Mrs. Klein,
Yes.
Mr. Foyce,
Yes.
Mr. Greider,
Yes.
Mrs. Jewin,
Yes.
Mr. Bozen,
Yes.
and Mr. Amos.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Someone to take,
Motion to adjourn?
no, someone to take the motion to suspend.
Motion to suspend the
Oh,
rules.
sorry. Too quick.
Motion to suspend the rules.
Motion, that's all good. We're a team. Motion to suspend as, Madam Clerk.
Mrs. Klein,
Yes.
Mr. Foyce,
Yes.
Mr. Greider,
Yes.
Mrs. Jewin,
Yes.
Mr. Bozen,
Yes.
Mr. Amos,
Yes.
and Mr. Morrissey.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to consider and pass for the second, third times and adopt the ordinance.
Second.
That motion has been made with the second. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Foyce,
Yes.
Mr. Greider,
Yes.
Mrs. Jewin,
Yes.
Mr. Bozen,
Yes.
Mr. Amos,
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey,
Yes.
and Mrs. Klein.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
The motion has been made with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
We adjourn. All right, so please stick around, council, for the swearing in ceremony.